Here, the blueprint is being released for how the SEC, the US regulatory authority, wants to turn the USA into the crypto hub of the entire world. Yes, you heard that right. SEC Chief Paul Atkins just shared an unthinkable video on his X account. What's happening here right now is bullish on so many levels. The Bitcoin price should actually be much higher, and Plan B is talking about this as well. In a new thesis, he explains here why the Bitcoin price isn't already much higher. And we actually have Natalie Brunell here, who is now recommending live on Fox TV that people buy Bitcoin. What a time to be alive. Before we take a look at all of this, especially what's going on with the SEC, which is really massive, let's smash that like button down below for higher Bitcoin prices, for new all-time highs, for even more freedom and peace, right? But first, we have David Bailey here, who actually writes, if you enjoyed the Paper Bitcoin summer, then you're also going to love the Eternal Paper Bitcoin September. And here he's already touching on the topic that's on a lot of people's minds right now. Why isn't the Bitcoin price much higher already? The Bitcoin price should be way higher by now. And one theory, of course, is what David Bailey is putting on the table here, that we have Paper Bitcoin, that BlackRock is creating Paper Bitcoin here. Other companies are creating Paper Bitcoin too, Strategy, and so on. I mean, in the end, who exactly is creating the Paper Bitcoin isn't really clear, but more paper certificates are being issued than there are actual Bitcoins. I'm still undecided about what form Paper Bitcoin actually takes here. Maybe on exchanges. That's probably the most likely place where Paper Bitcoin is being created. When it comes to ETFs and treasury companies, I actually don't think that's the case, but I can't say for sure. And of course, this way the Bitcoin price can be diluted, and then the Bitcoin price ends up being much lower than it actually should be. And that's exactly what Plan B is talking about here. Plan B has just released his latest prediction, and he's simply assuming that in this cycle we could reach 500,000 US dollars. I mean, there are always a lot of very critical voices when it comes to Plan B. Are his models accurate? Are his models not accurate? I would tend to say, no, his models are generally not accurate. But nonetheless, he makes a very interesting remark here regarding the current allegations of Bitcoin price manipulation.
About 6 times, and now we're, 3 times up. And we're not there yet. The big question, of course, is why isn't price higher than it is right now with all the inflow in the ETFs and the Bitcoin treasury companies buy?
So the big question, why isn't the Bitcoin price higher yet when we have all these treasury companies and the ETFs are seeing endless inflows? That just can't be the case here.
I don't know for sure, but what I hear around me is people, investors, rotating out of Bitcoin self-custody into ETFs and MicroStrategy. Maybe not with all their Bitcoins, but then at least with a big part of their Bitcoins, also to diversify a little bit between the many ways you can hold Bitcoin. And of course, I mean, that's what I did as well. I moved my Bitcoins to ETFs and Bitcoin treasury companies.
So that's obviously a very plausible explanation he's giving here. And I've talked about it myself a few times as well. That means we now have these massive flows into the treasury companies, like Strategy, Metabladed, and so on. And of course, also into the Bitcoin ETFs. But what if these aren't actually new buyers at all? What if it's just all the OGs? Now we're also seeing the big sales. Someone is selling 80,000 Bitcoin, and the Bitcoin price doesn't really go down in any significant way. Of course, it could also be that someone sells their Bitcoin, but then gradually buys ETFs from BlackRock on the other side. That means they're simply rotating. They still have Bitcoin, but now it's no longer in self-custody. Instead, it's in the form of ETFs or Bitcoin treasury companies. I mean, I would always strongly advise against that. I really have to say here, be careful, folks, with what you're doing here. If you sell your Bitcoin that you have in self-custody on your own hardware wallet, you're also giving up your self-sovereignty. You're giving up your freedom. Of course, you might get a bit more convenience, but you no longer have full control or censorship resistance. And I always say, not your keys, not your coins. Get yourself a hardware wallet. Only then can you be sure you're protected from censorship, from deep steal, from hackers, and much more. That's why I'm going to give you a recommendation below, a TREZOR hardware wallet. You can also use the code Bitcoin Hotel here. That'll get you a 10% discount on a TREZOR hardware wallet. Everyone really should look into this and maybe even get themselves a hardware wallet like this. I think in many cases, it's not about going all in or all out, but rather that some people might shift certain portions into ETFs or treasury companies. I've already seen it happening. Many are moving into treasury companies because they're hoping for higher returns there, hoping to basically outperform Bitcoin. But again, just an important note. Yes, you can do that, but you have to realize that you're basically giving up your self-sovereignty. And now we come to SEC Chief Paul Atkins, who is much much more bullish here than Gary Gensler. And he's actually talking here about the announcement of Project Cryptos, posting a video about it again on his own social media channel. The project has already been released since last week, but now he's addressing it explicitly once more. And this is actually about the blueprint for what the USA is planning now with Bitcoin and crypto. And the crazy thing is, you don't have to be a fortune teller or anything like that to figure out what's going to happen in the USA in the future. You just have to follow the official announcements, what the SEC, the White House, and so on are announcing. Let's go.
In the history of today, I should like to discuss what Commissioner Peirce, Hester Peirce, and I are calling Project Crypto, which will be the SEC's North Star in aiding President Trump in his historic efforts to make America the crypto capital of the world.
So they're already extremely bullish. That means they've now published Project Crypto here. He immediately refers to the blueprint here and says that this is the North Star, meaning the most important thing to make the USA a crypto stronghold and to support Donald Trump in his agenda to push Bitcoin, crypto, and digital assets forward. So that already sounds very, very bullish. In the EU, you could never imagine something like this. Not only that they announce it, but that they really push it and are actually proud of it, and just say, hey guys, we really need to go all out now. We're pushing this forward, we're pumping up the prices. Okay, of course they're not saying explicitly that they're pumping up the prices, but that's basically what it means indirectly. If you improve the regulatory framework here, it also means indirectly that prices can be pumped up.
SEC will not stand idly by and watch innovations develop overseas while our capital markets remain stagnant.
So they're not just going to sit back and watch as technology surges ahead and other capital markets overtake the US. There's always talk about how the Chinese can't be allowed to surpass us. Donald Trump is always warning and saying, hey folks, we need to be ahead of the Chinese, and the EU should really take a big lesson from that.
We're at the threshold of a new era in the history of our markets. As I mentioned earlier, today I'm announcing the launch of Project Crypto.
So I should mention that what he said here was already a few days old, but this is basically a remake of the video, where they used some theatrical effects to illustrate what the blueprint is and why all of this is so relevant. Unfortunately, I have to remove the background music now. There's still some movie music playing in the background, but because of copyright, I have to remove it.
Commission-wide initiative to modernize the securities rules and regulations to enable America's financial markets to move on-chain. The President's Working Group on Digital Asset Markets released the PWG report with clear recommendations for the SEC and other federal agencies to build a framework to maintain U.S. dominance in crypto asset markets. This report is the blueprint to make America first in blockchain and crypto technology. We will not watch from the sidelines. We will lead, we will build, and we will ensure that the next chapter of financial innovation is written right here in America.
That's pretty wild. They're saying here that they'll do everything to make sure the next big chapter about digital assets is written here in the USA. They won't just watch from the sidelines. They basically want to be the front player here, the front runner, the first mover, and they want to bring everything onto the blockchain, bring it on-chain. I mean, I have to offer a bit of criticism here too. I'm not really a big fan of putting everything on the blockchain. That also shows they haven't understood the difference between blockchain and Bitcoin. Here, it's generally about blockchain, but often blockchain is just plain nonsense. That means, for a very, very few use cases, a blockchain is good, especially for Bitcoin. But for many use cases, a blockchain is just very, very inefficient and simply a buzzword, where maybe it's just a bit of clever marketing. But honestly, it's a ridiculous statement to say you want to put everything on the blockchain. Here we are putting tomatoes on the blockchain. Let's fucking go. But what we can expect here is that the incentives are aligned. Here, everything is basically betting on higher Bitcoin prices. Everything is about more innovation in the US. Everything is about Bitcoin, crypto, digital assets. And now, all that's missing are the Bitcoin purchases. I've criticized this several times already. Yes, if you want to become the crypto Bitcoin hotspot here, then you also have to buy large amounts of Bitcoin. You can't just talk and release some videos. I mean, that's all well and good, and it's done very, very professionally now. But if you really want to become the crypto powerhouse of the world, then you have to do what Natalie Brunell is recommending here on Fox TV.
One interesting correlation has been Bitcoin and the money supply. Is that integral? Like here we've got the chart. It's pretty easy. You don't have to be a chartist to see, okay, they kind of trade in tandem here.
Here you can clearly see M2 money supply goes up, Bitcoin goes up. There's a massive correlation here, 83% correlation according to Lynn Alden. And it's really not rocket science to predict the Bitcoin price here if the M2 money supply keeps rising in the long term. But now comes the exciting part.
Well, one thing we know is that they're going to continue to debase, and liquidity has been at all-time highs, and that's largely because we're running these massive fiscal deficits. And guess what? They're going to continue. The projections made for the rest of the years.
So this is really, really important. One thing we know for sure, money is being printed. Even more money is being printed. And if there's one thing we can count on, it's that even more money will be printed. And this is now relevant, because he's talking here about the assumptions for this year, for the coming years, and what this has to do with Bitcoin.
We're going to be basically issuing about $18 trillion worth, or $18 billion worth of debt per day for the rest of the year, for the rest of 2025. So the thing you need is the one thing immune to currency debasement, immune to inflation, and that is Bitcoin.
So did I understand this correctly? I just had to watch it again. She first says 18 trillion per day, but that can't be right. That's 18 billion per day. I mean, just think about that for a second. 18 billion per day is being pumped into the supply here, and it's only going to keep increasing. That means it's 18 billion now, but in a few weeks or months it'll already be 19 billion, then 20, 30, 40, 100 billion at some point, and so on. And the only thing that can withstand this debasement is Bitcoin. Sure, gold to a certain extent as well, but gold isn't absolutely limited. Gold is only relatively limited. And that's why my big recommendation, if you're still looking for a good way to buy Bitcoin, check out 21 Bitcoin. It's the easiest way to buy Bitcoin here in Europe. Here you can set up savings plans, you can make one-time transfers, you can do auto-wallet transfers. There are so many things you can do here. Really, really great platform. An Austrian platform regulated in the EU, in Austria. They also work together with VR Bank Bayernit. Definitely check it out. I'll put a link down below. And with the code BitcoinOrdle, you can still get up to 20% off the fees when buying Bitcoin. And I'll see you next time. See you then, folks. Peace out.